this is a topic that a lot of people haven't touched on, but this is something that I think it's important to look at. So we actually see here, this was a report that was done by Seth Keshel. We've had Seth on the show before, and this is very interesting. So when the census is done every 10 years, they basically look at how many people are in the state, and then they add everybody up, and then that's how they award the electoral votes to each state. In 2020, because of the timing of the census, they did not catch people leaving California, leaving New York, leaving some blue states, and some red states gaining additional people, because I believe they did it in like the beginning ish of the 2020 year. And so what actually happened is, if you would have done the census after, like at the end of 2020, you would have actually had a very different electoral map according to this report here. And so we actually see that according to Seth Keshel, when you look at the proportioned map based on the states that Donald Trump actually won in the election, he would have actually won 320 electoral college votes to Harris's 218. So it's actually a pretty big difference. And you even see the potential GOP House majority was way larger. It could have been way larger than what actually ended up happening. And so what's very fascinating about this is that when you actually do the math, so I basically created an electoral map and we put all the math for all of the states here. What's really interesting is we have Wisconsin, Michigan, PA, North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, Nevada. Those were like kind of the swing states that people were talking about. So if Trump would have won Georgia and North Carolina, he would have been at 257. Pennsylvania would have put him at 276. Michigan without Pennsylvania would have been enough. Even Michigan without Nevada would have been enough to put him at 270. If we look at the infamous scenario where these are the actual results shaded by the margin, of course, 0 to 1 is tilt. Actually, I'm not showing that tab. So this is 0 to 1 is tilt, of course, percentage wise. Then you look at the lean margin, 1 to 5% is lean. Then you have 5 to 15 is likely. And then anything above 15 is a safe margin. These are the current results right now from the New York Times. So out of all of the states that Trump won, the closest ones were Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. They were the closest ones. And so what's really interesting is if you actually were to have awarded Kamala Harris these states, she would have actually won the election with 270 electoral college votes. Here's the really big problem with that. If you would have done it with the supposedly corrected census by the math that Seth had done, if you would have awarded Trump Arizona and Nevada and awarded Harris the 3 Rust Belt states, he would have actually won the presidential election with 276 electoral college votes to Harris's 262. And it's big enough of a difference because it was so close in the official electoral map where she would have gotten 270. But here, he actually ends up winning 276 to 262 because California actually had way more people moving out of it than it was projected by the census when they did it at the beginning of the year. And so you would have actually had a legitimately stolen election because the census would have just been completely botched due to COVID at that point. And
I
so,
think that would have been a little difficult to argue on their side. I
right.
mean, of course, we were talking about this just before the show, where I'd asked, are they going to correct it at all? If obviously some things were. What's debatable is how many people moved over between the states. Okay, that's something that's going to have to be figured out afterwards. But obviously, they didn't take into account a lot of this movement, and that's a major issue. Now, Trump getting 8 more electoral votes, that's not a huge deal. But I think what is especially going to be important for at least until 2026
Mhm.
is those congressional seats. Like
Right.
this means that there are 8 districts that Republicans should have picked up that just disappeared or don't exist this time
Right.
around.
Right. Yeah. It would have. Yeah. Literally, if we look at the report here, you can actually see it. The potential House majority could have been like 236 to 199, which is actually really similar to what I projected for the House funny enough. But the problem is when you look at when it compares the results from 2020 to 2022, it's a little bit flawed because it's like trying to look at a trend from a completely redistrict seat from different years. So the model's a little flawed, but funny enough, the model lining up with this was actually more accurate than what actually ended up happening. So what may have been the case is that my model probably wasn't bad. It was probably just the census. They just completely messed it up. And you could even look at the states, even like California. Harris is probably not going to even hit 10 million votes in the state of California.
One of the crazy things that we had brought up too is this isn't going to probably won't get corrected until the next census.
No,
So not
because
until 2030.
They have to do it again. Yeah, they're gonna have to correct it, and it's actually even worse, by the way, because this was corrected for the end of 2020, not for now. It's actually worse for them now. Like, there's been other electoral map projections for the count in the electoral college. It's actually worse for them now. I think like Mississippi picks up one, Louisiana picks up one. They have Texas at like 44. Florida's like at 32, 33.
Wow.
Yeah, and like California, I think in the newly projected one, I did a video on this a while back. It was like at 47 or something like that. And New York was like at 25. Like it's not gonna look pretty when they do the census.
That's really significant. I mean,
yeah.
I know we just had the big win. We just had 2024 huge win.
Right.
But until the census is corrected and those things are taken into account, like we definitely can't get complacent come 2028. I mean, you were bringing up your model and your projections here. Wisconsin was the closest state out of the swing states, came within just under 1 point. So if we can, again, right now, not take into consideration the change in population because that won't factor in until 2030.
Right.
But Trump still has to double down on the states. But his performance was really good. Depending on who takes that position, we were talking about this before as well. Depending on who fills his role, they're really going to have to hammer in, especially on some of the Rust Belt states.
If you enjoyed this clip from the podcast, hit the like button and subscribe for more content just like this.